Luck, random chance, a roll of the dice, a concept that's very definition implies an unfair advantage for one or many players. That being said, no matter how hard we try, luck always seems to find its way even into the most carefully crafted competitive experiences in one way or another. Ultimately, luck is unavoidable, so instead of trying to keep it out, why don't we just embrace that it'll work its way into our games and learn how to make the best of it? That's what we're going to be talking about in this video. I mentioned in the intro that there's no real way to keep luck from impacting competitive games, and while that is true, many games try to keep luck at a minimum by reducing the amount of time the game actually rolls the dice for you. Oftentimes, competitive games will have no instances of actual random chance events occurring, but this doesn't mean that luck doesn't exist in these games either. Luck impacts every single second of any competitive game due to the fact that these games require the players to make choices that they could never reasonably see all of the possible outcomes to, meaning no matter how good the player is, they are never going to be making a 100% educated decision, leaving however much they didn't or couldn't consider up to luck. It's easy to see this sort of instance in attack and defend style games such as Counter-Strike or Rainbow Six Siege. When you spawn as an attacker, you don't know where the defenders will be, but you still need to make a push into their defense. Sure, you can make a safe and educated guess. If you're playing Rainbow and are on the cafe map, you can pretty safely bet that the enemy will go third floor first, but they can just as easily choose to defend the basement, or anywhere else as well. This can impact the characters you bring, as they each have specific skills that might be more useful on one site than the other. Whether you picked the best team for the site the enemy chose or not, is all up to luck. But this is a fighting game channel, enough with the shooter examples. The same principle can be applied to pretty much any scenario in which you decide to press a button, but I feel like it's best exemplified through a specific fighting game character I hold near and dear: Axel. Axel is a character with lots of long-range buttons to keep the opponent from approaching, so it's clear that the name of the game for him is to make sure the opponent stays beyond arm's reach. However, Axel is a very committal zoner, which means whenever he chooses to use one of his long-range tools, he has to be ready to face the consequences if the button he pressed didn't work out. To fully demonstrate what I mean, let's put Axel in a situation he'll be facing all too often. Sole bad guy, sprinting at him from mid-screen. In this scenario, there are two main buttons Axel can use to zone him out, and those two buttons are 5P and 2H. However, each one of those buttons poses a very clear threat. 5P can be ran under, so if Sol continues to barrel towards Axel, he's going to get hit. That being said, if Axel chooses to use 2H and Sol instead jumps then air dashes, Axel will get punished for that instead. So how do you know if Sol is going to jump or not? You don't. Once Sol gets into this position, Axel is forced to make a guess, and if it doesn't work out in his favor, well, them's the breaks. Now, that's not to say there isn't anything else Axel can do to potentially respond to the scenario in a more positive way, but if I decide I want to keep Sol out by poking at him with a long-reaching button, there's no way around it, I have to guess. This can be applied, albeit to a lesser degree, to any character pressing any button at all. The simple nature of each attack only covering a certain range means there's always a chance that right as you press it, the enemy will move away and then punish. And like as I mentioned with the shooter example, you can make an educated guess and say, this Sol has a tendency to jump in this scenario, I'll use 5P. But that's all it is, an educated guess. He could still just as easily run forward, and there's no true way to know what he'll do.
The inner machinations of my mind are an enigma.
So we've talked about luck regarding how effective the choices you make will be, but what if you've accidentally made the wrong choice, but it still ends up lucky for you? Nobody is perfect, and when playing a fighting game, you're bound to make a mistake, whether it be in execution, situational awareness, or simply in making the most mathematically sound decision. Brian F., a high-level Street Fighter V player, is no stranger to this sort of luck impacting him Wait. Didn't we talk about him last video? Well, no matter. We're talking about him again. You're welcome for the publicity, Brian. Not that you need it. You see, some time ago, Brian F. won NLBC, widely regarded as the highest caliber Street Fighter weekly tourney by way of a completely accidental input. It was final round, final game, and he went to throw his opponent, but instead got a DP, which beat the opponent Shine's attempted tech of the throw. So Brian had made an input error that ended up winning him the tournament. That's the end of the story. Except it wasn't. Not long after this happened, in a different tournament set, this time against Rob TV, the same thing happened again. Brian went up to throw, but instead got dash low, which hit Rob trying to tech the throw. So Brian's already winning on accident a bit more than your average player. But then, in one more NLBC tourney, this happens.
What? What just happened?
You see, after Vega did the cross-up, he used his V-trigger, which is supposed to make the cross-up safe on block, but for some reason it whiffs and Brian gets a punish. At this point, everyone's aware of this phenomenon, and Brian's starting to get flack for it. People saying he's being carried by luck, and maybe isn't actually as good as his reputation may suggest. So is it true? Is Brian really just some washed-up goof who happened to get lucky enough times to make it into the big leagues? Of course not, are you insane? Luck happens sometimes, there's no way around it, and the two scenarios where Brian should have reasonably lost ending up in a lucky win for him is not enough to completely defile his entire fighting game career. Now, a few of you may have caught that I said 2 scenarios where Brian ended up with a lucky win, when I mentioned 3 instances of him winning due to a lucky scenario. Let's take a look at that third clip again, and I'll show you why I won't call this a lucky win. First and most obviously, Brian's already winning the round. If the rose did in fact work as intended, there was a very real chance Brian could have closed it out, especially since he would have been left with a bar of meter and 2 bars of V meter, while Metro would have been completely dry. The second reason is less obvious, but I feel like it proves my point even better. Notice how after the rose whiffs, Brian is able to get a crouch light, stand light, into EX dash punch. Now that might not sound very impressive, but put yourself into his shoes. You're stuck in the corner, and you are faced with a completely new scenario, something you've never seen happen before. The rose isn't supposed to whiff, so most people would just keep holding down back. Vega pressed a button that's supposed to make you block, and you haven't blocked yet. That's scary. But Brian, at a moment's notice, was able to see the rose whiff, think, this can be punished on whiff. Start holding back to charge the EX dash punch, do the right combo, just one more jab would have whiffed, and then kill with the just charged EX dash punch. Skill in fighting games isn't just about controlling every single scenario perfectly. That's an unreasonable expectation to have. Skill can also be about being able to, at a moment's notice, react to an unusual or lucky scenario and get the most out of it you possibly can. So we've discussed luck occurring in 2 different types of ways, even when luck is actively trying to be minimized. But how about when a game fully embraces luck to the point where it adds luck-based mechanics intentionally? Admittedly, this sort of thing is very hard to achieve in a way that makes the game better overall. Brawl's tripping comes to mind as a luck-based mechanic that actively detracts from the game's enjoyment both casually and competitively. However, that's not to say luck-based mechanics can't be good for a game's health, and we can't talk about a luck-based character without talking about the most infamous of them all, Guilty Gear's Faust. Faust is a character built entirely around a luck-based special move called What Could This Be?, in which he reaches into his pocket and pulls out a completely random item from a pool of around 10 possible. The item, its effects on the match, and even the position it's thrown is completely up to random chance. That being said, Faust is designed in such a way that his items don't feel like they take away from the honesty or competitive integrity of Faust as a character, and there are a few very smart reasons why. First and most importantly of all, none of Faust's items are inherently bad. When Faust throws an item, there is almost no chance that he's going to end up actively getting punished just because of a bad dice roll. Of course, some items are better than others, but there is no one item that hurts him and him exclusively. This allows the items to add a unique dynamic to Faust's gameplay, where throwing an item has a guaranteed chance of making the opponent at least have to do something to deal with it, and depending on the item, the answer for an optimal response is different. This means Faust specializes in keeping the opponent on their toes with item after item, constantly forcing them to be thinking about Faust's items on the screen as opposed to actually getting their offense started. Second, none of Faust's items are overpowered, and the ones that are stronger than others are balanced in their own unique ways to help them feel fair. Faust's strongest item without a doubt is his Meteor, which forces the opponent to block a falling meteor shower from anywhere on the screen, but this is balanced by making the item exceedingly rare for Faust to pull. His Mini-Faust and other mini-characters are also very strong, as they lock the ground down and force the opponent to take to the air, but these too are rare to get and can be avoided by swiftly approaching on Faust before the Mini-Faust lands. Third, all of his items can help either player depending on who responds best. No matter what Faust throws, you can do something to avoid being forced into a bad scenario. Faust's most notable setup with his items would probably be his ability to make them cross up. Since they are detached from him and act on their own, it's relatively easy for Faust to quickly snap behind the opponent using his teleport or an air dash to make the opponent get hit by a surprise cross-up. And while some items like Meteor almost guarantee Faust a shot at this mix-up, it's never a 100% chance that Faust is going to get free damage or pressure out of an item. And yes, Faust does have counterplay to every single one of the options the opponent can take to disrespect his items. He'd be a worthless character if he didn't. It's the fact that, while random, the items all demand a response from both the Faust player and his opponent that can end up benefiting whichever one makes the correct decision, that makes Faust a successful example of luck-based mechanics in fighting games. The final luck-based mechanic I'd like to mention is a recent change to Street Fighter V's Dan, in which a luck-based mechanic was added to his toolkit that served both as a buff and a nerf. At launch, Dan's Gadoken functioned as it did in every single other Street Fighter, as a silly joke fireball that didn't really do all that much. That is, unless Dan got a stun in the corner. With Dan's short-range Gadoken, it was possible to space it so that it would leave him with enough plus frames to combo into itself again, allowing for an infinite combo most players referred to as the Danfinite. And while Dan was not an overwhelmingly strong character by any means, many people thought that having an infinite was too much for any Street Fighter character and hurt the competitive integrity of the game. So what did Capcom do about it? They buffed him. Now you might be thinking, how could Capcom use a buff to remove an infinite? Surely part of his kit would have needed to be nerfed in order to solve this problem. But you see, Capcom very intelligently used luck in this situation to make Dan stronger overall and remove the infinite. After the patch, Dan's Gadoken now has a small chance to come out red, in which case its power, range, speed, and damage increase. However, the most important thing is that red fireball now knocks down the opponent. That means if Dan is looping Gadokens in the corner, and he gets a red fireball, the combo ends as the opponent gets knocked to the ground. Dan can still do the infinite for as long as it takes for him to get a red fireball, and now that he has this red fireball, he can use Gadoken in other situations too. So by adding a luck-based mechanic, Capcom found a very smart solution to fix both a problematic combo and improve Dan's overall strength with just one change. As you can see, luck is completely unavoidable even in the most competitive environments. But each game's willingness to embrace the luck and use it in creative ways is what creates new and interesting scenarios that keep fighting gamers coming back for the next installment time and time again. Some may like luck to be kept at as much of a minimum as possible. Some may love the feeling of forcing their opponent into luck-based scenarios. And some may love rolling the dice themselves. No matter how you feel about luck in fighting games, there's a game for you. What game is best for you, I can't say, but I wish you the best of luck in finding it. With that out of the way, this has been an adventure, and I hope to see you in the next one. Peace.